some presentations to pass out here.
Okay. You go ahead and do that while we're calling the meeting to order. I think, Madam Chair, we recording, Max? Ready to go? Okay.
Good evening and welcome to the March 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you will find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at accgov.com/planning. For those of you attending in person, on the table by the door, you'll find a sign-in sheet and copies of tonight's agenda. For each agenda item, we will begin with a report from ACC planning staff. This is followed by a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes. We will then hear from members of the public. 3 minutes are allowed for any member of the public who wishes to address the commission. When addressing the commission, please provide your name, address, and the nature of your interest in the project, and direct your comments to the planning commission and not to the applicants. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants or members of the public at the podium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the commission and is part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the 3-minute time limit. For all speakers, please pay attention to the timing device near the projector screen. The device will display a yellow warning light when you have 30 seconds left and a red light when your time is up. After the public comment period, applicant or the representative may request a 2-minute response. After that, the applicant will take their seat in the audience. At this point, the public portion for this agenda item is closed and the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss the item. We will receive no additional public or applicant comments unless requested by a commissioner. Finally, please note that the microphones in this room are very sensitive and that the meeting is being broadcast live. Please turn off and silence your cell phones. Okay, so we'll start with the first item under general business, which is introduction of staff reports and other documents submitted to the Planning Commission into the official record. Second. Okay, motion a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. Motion carries. And then the February 2nd, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion or a comment?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any reports review today?
I do not have a review of MACORS, but while I've got 1 second, I will take this opportunity to identify Jimmy Rowan, who is with our traffic engineering department, back row to your right, back there, Jimmy. So if you have questions, he's here for Newton Bridge Road because there was a modification that you have in front of you regarding a recommendation in the report on them asking the developer to pay for infrastructure for an intersection. They have recanted that, but still have concern. So that he is here to answer those questions if you have them this evening.
Great. Okay, we'll first start with the first item under old business, which is 1125 Newton Bridge Road. We'll start with our staff report.
Good afternoon or evening, Planning Commission. This is the case for Newton Bridge Road. Next slide, please. The applicant is requesting a rezone from employment industrial with conditions to single-family residential, specifically the RS25 zoning district. This requires a corresponding change in the future land use from employment to traditional neighborhood. The applicant is proposing 216 single-family detached houses in a subdivision. And they provide concept site plan and tree management plan for your reference. It is non-binding, as we've noted, but it is there for us to assess some general compatibility with our codes. This is the site. You can see it's generally wooded. We have the Holland Youth Sports Complex down here to the south. We have Newton Bridge Road snaking up along on the right. And then we have some residential subdivisions here and here flanking it. But the site itself is undeveloped. As you can see on our future land use, we've designated this as employment. It's a bit of a standalone district out there at the edge of Newton Bridge and really the edge of the county. You can see the county line up at the top right there in the top left corner. And they are requesting to go to traditional neighborhood on the right, which is the same future land use that these residential subdivisions that flank it carry. So it is consistent with our future land use map. And then this is the zoning map on the left. It is EI with the condition That's the current zoning. And then it would move to RS25, which again is consistent with the surrounding residential neighborhoods. This is the concept plan they have submitted. You can see it's generally just laid out with two entrances on Newton Bridge here and here. And then a network of streets there. Everything's going to be the same as far as the layout goes. It's all 216 single family houses. You can see a little bit of a green there. And then on the, I guess, south side of the project, you have a creek that runs through here. And there's a lot of wet areas adjacent to that that would not be suitable for building on. And the applicant has proposed having some kind of crossing of this creek in this wet area to tie into the park for pedestrians or bikes. And if you've seen your staff report, you'll note that Leisure Services and TPW, Transportation Public Works, have commented on some of those bike ped connections there, including that one. We would note that from staff standpoint, that this is consistent. This plan is generally consistent with our zoning ordinance. As far as what they are building is generally compatible with the RS25 zone. It's compatible with our future land use map, and it is compatible with our zoning map. It is, however, inconsistent with our 2018 comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan calls generally for infill development versus a greenfield site like this that's out on the edge. We'd like to see locations that are closer into town get redeveloped or developed prior to going out towards the edge. There's also no variety of housing. It's the same type of housing across the board. Our traditional neighborhood description also calls for a bit more variety of housing. There's also, more importantly, perhaps no nearby neighborhood services or destinations here. So you're going to have to get in your car and drive some distance, some perhaps significant distance into the county to access the things that you're trying to access on a daily or weekly basis. So that's why it's not particularly consistent with our comprehensive plan. We would note that the site is unlikely to be used according to its existing employment and employment industrial zoning and future land use. Our Economic Development Department has said that they don't necessarily have a problem with this leaving our database, so to speak, of industrial sites. So they're comfortable with it moving away, although they would note that as a general rule, they want to re-examine the industrial zoning, the employment industrial zoning, the employment future land use across the county to make sure that they are not giving away too much of that critical land and that they can protect it. This site is not one of those sites that they feel like needs to be protected. The biggest thing here is that there's a lack of infrastructure to support the development, notably both transportation and sewer or wastewater. And these infrastructure, as you can see from our transportation public works and our public utilities comments, these are significant. A pump station is a very significant jump in infrastructure. All of the sidewalks, the roundabouts, those kinds of things for transportation are also a very significant jump. And those would be maintained by the public. Right now, we have strong concerns as staff that the proposed zone does not create enough tax revenue to pay for all of these things. And so they would basically the maintenance gap here would be on the rest of Athens-Clarke County residents to close. So the last thing that we wanted to note is that they did not address really the previous planning commission comments. You had made comments to the effect that you looked for more density, more variety of housing, perhaps some corner stores to help meet those daily needs. And this would have required the applicant to change their request because RS25 does not accommodate those kinds of requests, but they have chosen to carry on with their original RS25 request and not respond to any of those comments. So in light of all of that, staff is recommending a denial of both the future land use and the zoning. That concludes the staff report for this project.
Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from the applicant next.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Perfect. If we could start with this last slide, that's exactly where I would like to start. Tiffany Hogan, on behalf of D.R. Horton, 1371 Dogwood Drive, Conyers, Georgia. So I am here this evening again with 1125 Newton Bridge Road. I wanted to start with this slide because there are some things that are in the staff report that we don't feel are really fair evaluations of how this took place and how we ended up back here. So the first thing that I want to say is it was not any sign of disrespect, with not having any of the comments change the plan. We'll start there because we stand by this plan with where the property is located, that this is a location that would support a residential development and not necessarily retail or commercial development at this time. We are not experts, obviously, in the retail and commercial space, but considering the other projects that are in the area that are already existing communities, what we have provided to you is consistent with what's existing in the area. And many times, national builders are, of course, attacked with going in and trying to put more density and just go overkill. Whereas we initially did look at a RS-15 plan for this site, and we determined after evaluating the area that we wanted to remain consistent with the area and go with the RS-25 traditional neighborhood development instead, which is what is before you. So yes, the comments regarding adding commercial to the front, comments regarding adding more density, we did not feel that those were the best use of this property at this site. In addition, since our last meeting, I have met with Commissioner Fisher, and we understand that his district and Commissioner Thornton's district abut each other right in this area. So we met with him first, and he is actually going to facilitate having a conversation with Commissioner Thornton as well. He did let me know that there are some other things that may be coming to that area, that at that time, I think it may be a better evaluation of possibly adding some commercial to the area. But at this time, for purposes of this application, the full residential 216 unit development is what we are seeking approval of at this time. As far as the staff's recommendations regarding consistency with the zoning ordinance, the future land use map, the zoning map, again, we wanted to stay consistent with those things and not request amendments to your future land use, not go extreme with our request for density, not go extreme with our request for the zoning here. The only inconsistency that staff has noted is with the 2018 comprehensive plan. And if you review page 3 of the staff report, you will actually notice that several of those bullet points we are actually consistent with the proposed development, including that housing options reflect the diversity and meet the needs of the community, including housing for families and a diverse workforce. Also increasing the amount of and providing access to affordable housing. As I discussed the last time that I was here, these homes in this community will be priced under $400,000, closer really to the $350,000 mark, which is right in that really, really good spot for what we find your local hometown heroes need in order to be able to afford homes of this size and this type. Your comp plan calls for a vibrant and physically attractive community with a variety of places and equitable access to parks, open space, and other community gathering places. This project, as staff pointed out, abuts the sports complex. We have voluntarily agreed to make a connection there that you see on the site plan that goes into the sports complex. What better connectivity could you have than that? There's also 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street throughout, and we also put 5-foot sidewalks on the frontage of the property. We understand that your departments have recommended a 10 to 12-foot trail for that connectivity to the sports complex. We have no problem with that. The only thing that we would suggest, I believe they put concrete in the language, is to instead change the language to hard surface for the connectivity, because what we've seen in the last few years is that there's sometimes issues with supply, whether of concrete, asphalt, and once we get out there and really get into the engineering, we can make a better determination as to which material is actually best to be used used there, but we have no problem with it being a hard surface. We would just want the flexibility in what that hard surface is. To continue on with the comp plan, ensure equitable access to basic infrastructure, including sidewalks, lighting, street trees, et cetera, to enhance neighborhood safety and identity. We have done all of that with this project. We have already submitted the tree plan to staff, as mentioned in staff's report. We also have taken on the commitment to provide the infrastructure that is needed for sewer. We've worked through with them so that that pump station application will go along with this application when it goes to your city council. So we've been having those conversations. We were rather surprised to see the recommendation from the traffic department, and I understand there's someone here this evening. I would have loved to receive a phone call in advance, though I must state, so that we could have talked through that a bit. Someone from traffic did participate in our pre-application meetings, our development meeting that we had with your team, and a roundabout was not brought up. A roundabout is quite a significant addition to a community, as you all know. So to throw it in this late in the game is a bit troubling, but we are open to those conversations. What I would ask that Planning Commission consider is there are multiple other developments that are in that area. And just because this is the application that you're seeing at this time, that all of the cost of that roundabout, if that is in fact the traffic remedy that is actually needed there, is not placed on D.R. Horton for development of this project, but is equitable and fair and spread to the other developers that are coming into that area as well. But we would love to continue those conversations with traffic. Again, it's just unfortunate that that did not come up sooner. There's a note also on page 3 of the staff report that discusses that our site plan isn't binding, and staff also mentioned that in his presentation earlier. What I can assure you is that the only time that we change a site plan that we present for zoning, other than based on comments and such that come through the process, is if there is something significant that comes out of the engineering phase that would prohibit us from being able to move forward with the conceptual plan. We're not just putting a plan in front of you to say, this is what we think we would like to do. This is the plan, if approved by zoning, that will go to our engineers for the grading plan design as well. And this is the plan that we would continue with. So I don't want it to appear that we're just presenting something there to say, this is what we're thinking about doing. This is the plan that we're actually very proud of. We stand by this design and we would like to move forward with it unless engineering changes are necessary. If you would go back to the site plan. So I do just want to point out a few of the highlights on the site plan to remind Commission of why we believe in this particular design. It is 216 homes. There are 2 entrances that are off of Newton Bridge Road, which is pretty much the availability of road frontage that we have that would meet the Transportation Department and the GDOT requirements for spacing between those entrances as well. So 2 main access points off of there. There is no other frontage to the property. It is surrounded either by the sports complex or other residential already existing. So there's no other access point to the community. This community will have a large amenity area of its own, with obviously us taking into consideration that one of the amenities as well would be accessibility to that park that's below there. The amenity area would include, which you have some photographs in the handout that I sent you, a tot lot or playground area, a swimming pool, a cabana, and we haven't set our minds directly on pickleball courts. Pickleball has become more popular, so it'll either be pickleball courts, tennis courts, something like that. Some sort of court area that would be included in there as well. As staff mentioned, there is a significant amount of open space that we're leaving on this site. There is a creek area there, but we have included on the site design where those local, state, and federal buffer areas are required for that creek. So the area that you see that's left undisturbed outside of where it's marked for a buffer is area that we chose not to put homes in order not to increase that density and to leave the open space there for others to enjoy and to also create a buffer between the existing residential and the new development. This project was rezoned about 25 years ago. I think we did that math last time I was here. and it has remained vacant since that time, with them not moving forward with the research facility, I think it was, that was supposed to be on that site. We do believe extremely that this is a great location for a residential development, and that's the best use of that property, and not for it to be industrial or anything manufacturing. Because outside of it being that isolated piece that's zoned for employment industrial there, you have to consider that if some facility like that went into place, you have existing residential areas that are already there, and those folks would be affected by that. Also consider that if it were a workplace or commercial, it would in fact increase the amount of traffic that's coming from there than residential would. I would also like to mention, there was.
I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you. Is there anyone, we'll move on to the public portion, public comment portion for this item. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of this project? Okay, and is there anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Ellie Swenson, and I live at 140 Saxon Woods Drive, the neighborhood that's directly adjacent to the parcel in question. I'm speaking in opposition to D.R. Horton's application for this rezoning. As the applicant stated, and as we all know, Athens desperately needs housing, but we also need our leadership to be careful about who provides that housing and how they go about it. The applicant's argument that this rezone would not adversely affect the balance of land uses in the area and would not overtax the load on public facilities is not convincing. Rezoning this parcel to RS 25 would rob the corridor of the option to have employment, commercial, and public service spaces that would contribute to the area's economic and social vitality. This rezoning request also sets a strong precedent that decreases land use diversity and increases car dependency, two results that the Athens Comprehensive Plan and many other supplementary plans really try to avoid. In terms of public facility burdens, the applicant has significantly downplayed this proposal's impact, specifically on local roadways. As mentioned, TPW has stated that the development decreases Newton Bridge Road's level of service to an E and an F at two local intersections, and that mitigation from D.R. Horton is required. I now understand D.R. Horton didn't have an opportunity to address those concerns, but the fact that that was not mentioned anywhere in the application proactively is very concerning to me as a local resident. I think that impact is fairly clear. So again, no such mitigation strategies are offered, and there's no external connectivity that's included that I can see on the neighborhood site plan. Also, the applicant refers to providing sewer infrastructure with the capacity to support nearby parcels. What is the extent of this capacity? Is the sewer going to be funded by the applicant, or is it going to be funded by TAD funds? As the applicant states, this parcel has been vacant for over 20 years. As such, it's developed an undisturbed ecosystem and a significant tree canopy. The lack of attention given to this proposal's environmental impacts is very concerning. There's no information given on the expected impact. No ecological knowledge is demonstrated in this application, and there's no detail given on how impacts will be mitigated or measured. Further, I don't believe that D.R. Horton builds the kind of housing this commission has asked for. Proposal mentions affordability and quality housing without any detail on how those are defined. They have a Better Business Bureau customer rating of 1.1 out of 5 stars and an overall sale price of over $300,000, which she had mentioned. And that exceeds what is affordable for Athens median income of just over $43,000 a year. So I do not believe D.R. Horton is the right company to trust with this parcel if it is going to be residentially zoned. I also believe that D.R. Horton's resistance to a planned development approach demonstrates an unwillingness to be accountable to and engaged with the Athens community and its needs for and visions for the future. Finally, as a resident of Saxon Woods and a community planner, I have really strong concerns about the lack of public outreach surrounding this rezone request. I asked the applicant to please provide details about how and when residents were contacted, as well as the results of that outreach. In a previous meeting, it was mentioned that neighborhoods were invited to a public meeting and only one family attended. I want to know a little bit more about that outreach effort if I can. And in closing, as the Newton Bridge Road corridor gains development traction, I ask this planning commission and all Athens leadership to take your time, ask more questions, and please protect Athens' long-term well-being by denying this rezoning request. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in opposition to this application?
Hi, folks. My name is Stephen Wright, and I live at 101 Wood Lake Drive. I'm not going to be as eloquent as the lady who just talked before me, but I think yeah, I agree with staff. I implore you guys to vote in accordance to what staff recommended. I think generally, as one of the smallest counties by land size in the state, you have no business building any more single-family homes in this county. And as the applicant mentioned, I think the county park adjacent to this proposed development is a great amenity. I think it would be severely wasted on just 216 homes. So it's really all I've got. I hope you guys vote with staff recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition to the application? Okay, if you wish, the applicant could have 2 minutes to respond, but you do not have to use if you don't want to. Would you like to?
Just briefly, thank you. Thank you, Commission. So I would just say that we sent notices out as described last time based on the addresses that we had for the for a half-mile radius, I believe it is, for the county. We use the same address, 400 feet. So we use the same mailing list that the county uses. If there's anyone here this evening that feels like they didn't have an opportunity for that meeting, I'm more than happy to provide them with my business card and for us to have a discussion there. There has been discussion about the possibility of applying for TAD funds for this site, but we have not made that final decision yet, as you have not seen an application. And once everyone is discussing the tax implications with the 216 homes, I want you to remember that the 216 homeowners would be taxpayers as well. The incremental effect of the maintenance of the roads, the sidewalks, whatever, well, not the sidewalks, but the roads and the infrastructure would be incremental to the remaining residents of Athens-Clarke County. If we are keeping that mindset of any new development would be a tax burden, then what it sounds like is that Athens-Clarke County is closed to development. And I'm sure that's not the message that you mean to send. So thank you. I'm happy to entertain any questions from Commission.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the Planning Commission portion discussion of this item. Do you want to start, Sarah?
Yeah, just while the applicant has just sat down, I don't have a question, just more of a thought that popped up from the last thing that you said. I know. Which I thought tied in with some of your early comment as well. That the issue of the tax expenditure. And what I perceived as some confusion when you were talking about the density of this project and the ways that y'all limited your density. In seemingly out of deference to the neighbors, I'm sure that less density is what you have heard over and over again. If you've done a lot of these things, we want less density, we want less traffic, we want less people. And so I can very much understand how it would feel kind of backwards to have the planning staff and have members of the public, and then probably also your planning commissioners will say things along these lines as well, that what we are looking to see is more density. And that goes to the tax expenditures as well. The more density we have, the more the balance can be tipped. And these numbers are searchable. I'm sure someone else will talk about that. The more density that this parcel sees, the more likely it could be to bring that money back in of the tax expenditures it's making out. And I'm sure that if there was more density in this request, then we would have maybe different people in here saying, don't put this many houses near my house. But there's definitely a split in public opinion, which is kind of exciting to see it come up here, that less density all the time is not necessarily what we're looking for or what the county needs. And I can definitely understand how that would be weird from a person who's been in this position a long time. So.
Yeah, First, I wonder if we could just hear from the traffic engineering department about appreciate the written comments that y'all sent us, and I wonder if I can ask you questions, or if you have like.
I don't have this. I'm just here to answer questions. First one I've ever been to, so do I need to come up here?
No, that's good. Yeah, thank you. The written email that we got says that traffic engineering has concerns about decreased level of service at two of the nearby intersections.
Yes.
It would cause an LOS drop from C to E at Vincent Drive and Newton Bridge Road intersection, and from D to F at Cathwood, Newton Bridge. I wonder if you could just explain to us what that means.
Specifically for Vincent, the level of service, excuse me, on the spot here. I have the TIA that they prepared. It would drop the level of service from 23 seconds in the AM for Vincent Drive to, or the level of service, it would be a delay is what it is. It would go from 23-second delay currently to a 37-second delay in the AM for Vincent Drive.
Does that mean traffic leaving Vincent Drive to come on to Newton Bridge Road?
Each vehicle, they're gonna have to wait
On average.
an average
wait,
at that time. Yes.
37 seconds
Mhm.
instead of 23. Okay.
And for, what is it, Cathwood, it would jump from 43, this is a PM peak. So, and that, it didn't affect the AM peak on Cathwood or the PM peak on Vincent. I know that's a little confusing. But, for the PM peak level of service drop, the delay would go from 44 seconds with the no build condition to 88 seconds.
Okay,
And that's significant.
yeah, and what would be your approach to remedying that if Athens-Clarke County were to approve additional housing up in that part of Athens? How would you address those traffic concerns? Would it be traffic lights, traffic circles, or other things?
The traffic engineer specifically requests at the Cathwood intersection, because it's such a large intersection, a roundabout. And at Vincent, he said he would leave that up to the builder or to the applicant to come up with a remedy. He didn't have any suggestions for that one.
Okay, and am I right to understand that doing a roundabout at the Cathwood intersection would require acquiring privately held land
Most likely, yes.
adjacent to that intersection, not like enough right of way to do it?
Correct. There usually isn't. I haven't looked at the right of way personally, but generally speaking, yes, roundabouts require a right of way purchase.
Okay, and with all the roundabouts that y'all have put in around Athens in recent years, does the county use eminent domain to acquire that land generally, or?
That is beyond the scope of my knowledge, sir. I don't deal with right of way acquisition at all.
Okay.
I couldn't answer that question.
Yeah.
I can tell you that, and this is not pertinent to that, but the reason we favor roundabouts is our after studies has shown a roughly 80% drop in crashes. So, I mean, they're effective, but yes, they're expensive. And to address the concern that it was late in the game, that's when I stepped out. I spoke to the traffic engineer because I wasn't aware why it was so late to recommend a roundabout. So he said that he didn't have a good answer. It simply slipped by him and he apologizes.
Okay, I do have some other comments, but if anyone had.
Does anyone else
questions
have a question for him?
Yes,
Good.
just follow up on the calculation of the wait times. Is that 37 seconds from when the car hits the stop sign, or is it 37 seconds from when they come to a stop if they're behind a line of cars?
That is a good question, and I'm not, even though my specialty is studies, you just hit my Achilles heel. I'm thinking it has to do with the current wait time to get up to the stop sign and pull out, but
Okay,
I'm not positive. But
okay.
I will brush up and I can get back in touch with you if you would like.
That would be great. To me, the difference between the longer wait time and the shorter wait time seems negligible if it's just the amount of time, if it's the entire amount of time that you are spending waiting. And so an explanation, if you have an explanation of how are those two grades different for what is the actual impact of that?
Understand. I'm gonna take a quick note, so I'm gonna respond to you. So, anybody?
This isn't even really a question, just making the comment that, that the wait times aren't just a matter of inconvenience to drivers, but also that's idling time. So there are environmental concerns as well. So.
Yes, if we have, like, if there's data on that, like, this
How
is,
much do we pump out into the air?
yeah, what is
There's 10 more
the
seconds.
overall impact of this versus, induced demand, things like that? Does making it easier to drive make more people want to drive?
And one just follow up, from what you said about the wait time on for Cathwood and Vincent traffic, I take it that there's no impedance of traffic flow on Newton Bridge Road. It's only traffic entering from those two
Yes,
sides.
so Newton Bridge is what we call free flow. There's no stop signs to stop them. The only stop control is on the side streets.
Okay, thank you.
Is Newton Bridge Road under complete local control?
I believe so, yes, ma'am. Good. And generally, the reason I know that, if it's GDOT, we got to beg and ask them permission, and it takes forever. So we've made things along the way, certain changes here and there, and we didn't have to go through that process. So pretty sure it's local control.
Anyone else have a question for him? Okay, thanks so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Did you want?
Yeah, so I did have some other comments, which were that I'm generally favorable toward the idea of residential rezoning on this site. I think the current zoning, looking at the zoning map, is weird and inappropriate, and we don't like isolated zoning districts. And this is an EI zone that's surrounded by single-family zones and adjacent to a park. And it seems clear that there's not a chance anything industrial is ever going to get built there because the neighbors would be out in force to oppose it, and it's right by a park. And so I don't know why it is EI, but it strikes me as just, as a general matter, I think the applicant is on the right track. I think the land use change is good, and the idea of rezoning for residential makes the most sense for that site. And more housing near parks is good. And, it's one of my pet peeves that our Parks Department builds all these enormous, beautiful parks way outside of town where everybody has to drive there to get to them. And I think it would make a lot more sense to be doing parks in infill sites, but they're doing what they're doing. And so building more 216 new homes right next to a park seems like a great idea. The only thing I wish is that it could be 316 new homes, because I think Athens-Clarke County desperately needs lots more housing. And, so I think more density would make sense to me. I mentioned this to the applicant at the last, when we're here for comment. And, something like RS15 or RS8, I think would maybe be even better there. And in terms of affordability, I think, some attached housing product and so on would be better. So those are my main concerns with it. And it sounds like the traffic stuff can be addressed. There would be some expense to doing so. I guess there's kind of the overall picture of changing the land use and changing the zoning there makes a lot of sense to me. And I just wish there was certain more housing being proposed on this site.
I'm sure that's something that's on everyone's mind, because I know we talked about it when we saw this before. And I think the question that I'm about to ask has already been asked and answered before, but I don't remember the answer. Are the other single family, and this is for you, Brad, I hope you will know the answer. Are the other subdivisions around this area, are they on sewer?
One immediately to the north is on.
Saxon Woods.
Okay.
Saxon Woods is,
I think it's septic.
Saxon Woods is septic, and I'm blanking on the subdivision that is just east of the park. I think is sewer.
Okay. And what's being proposed here is a lift station? Am I getting these two confused?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this would probably be a question for the applicant. Is septic a non-starter for a development like this?
Septic is a non-starter for a development like this.
Okay, that's a pretty straightforward answer. I
Yes.
appreciate that. Not that I love septic.
I don't even believe the size lot would qualify for septic. You would be talking about larger size lots. That's a requirement of the health.
Kristen?
So I wanted to actually propose a motion to change the future land use to traditional neighborhood. But I wanted to stop after that, so.
Are you making?
I want to make a motion to change future land use to traditional neighborhood.
Second.
Any further discussion? So the motion is to accept the future land use request to change future land use from employment center to traditional neighborhood. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? One? Did you guys get that, or whoever need to get that?
Got it.
Okay. Okay,
So from there, though, this is where I'm a little conflicted because like I am actually concerned about the traffic at Cathwood, like that turn off of Newton Bridge is really bad. And I'm a little concerned about the lift station. I feel like if Lucy were here, she would be voicing her concerns about lift stations. I've just been sort of trained to react to them with, I don't know, skepticism. But I'm also not a plumber and I don't really know how they work really. So I'm just kind of pumping the brakes. And I'm also conflicted because I don't mind the idea of housing here. I wish the development was a little bit different. I wish that it offered some more amenities to the larger area. But I also don't think that if we offer up something, say like an RS 15 or RS 8, I don't think the developer would come back and like now create a new development based on that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm like firmly on the fence. I'm really sorry. So I'm happy to hear from other people about that. So.
Yeah. Where to start? Yeah, I also recognize the need for more housing in Athens. I think that we really need to do the math on whether the future maintenance costs of all the infrastructure and all the services would cover the cost of these single family homes. What I've heard is that it wouldn't, that you need at least like R8 to start to have single family housing that pays for itself or denser. I'm also on the fence of whether, this should be an urban extension. It would have been great if our comprehensive plan had designated this as a place for, new denser mixed use development that's truly connected, has all the services, all the infrastructure, and all our departments were on board with it, because clearly there's a lot of disjointed siloing planning. In favor of this being a new neighborhood, there's the park, absolutely. There's the denser neighborhood to the south. There's the planned multi-use path along Newton Bridge Road. That's a big factor for me in favor of having housing here. And then the bus on Vincent Drive is good, but I don't think it makes sense. I think it would make sense if there was a easy path through the park to the bus line in the short term, and that doesn't sound like leisure services would guarantee that at all. So yeah, I'm not feeling too positive about this. I think it's a very sprawly density, the R25, big single family houses fronted by 2-car garages. That I don't think that's the kind of development that that's financially good for the county, or it tends to be human oriented in general. What else did I not say? Yeah, and again, like we said before, we really need more housing variety and affordability in this town that could be achieved by smaller houses. Get those prices a little bit lower. If it was right on the bus route, that gets into the idea of housing and transportation affordability, then maybe every trip to work wouldn't have to be by car, and that would decrease household costs also. So those are the things that I'm concerned about, but the main thing is I would love to see the county do the math on the costs of maintaining the roads and the sewer, and particularly 20 years into the future versus the expected tax revenue from this development. Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, a question for the applicant. My understanding from your previous presentation was that these lots are approximately 8,000 square feet on average. Do I have that right? Or are you able to give us a number? Because you're leaving, looks like more than half of the parcel or half of the parcel undeveloped.
I believe the lots are 60 by 125. Let's check it.
2,500 square feet.
I actually have two hearings tonight, so excuse me for 60 by 125, yes.
Okay, so they're under 8,000 square feet. So, and Brad, am I right to understand, like the RS5 zoning gives them a total density for the total parcel. If they build it like shown here, they can't build anything on the reserved parts because they will have met their
Correct.
allowable density. But if we approved a straight rezone and DR Horton decided to build 25,000 square foot lots and use the whole parcel, they could
Yes.
do that. Okay. Because, you know, to a couple of people have mentioned, does residential pay for its infrastructure? And it seems to me that 8,000 square foot lots that are compressed in this way, you know, maybe pay for their infrastructure, but if it were spread out over the whole parcel, then I think it would be a long-term sort of fiscal time bomb for Athens. And so I wouldn't support, I guess, so let me ask you a question, to you, Brad. This is not it's not offered as a binding site plan. Would it be within the power of this group to approve the requested rezone with the condition that this site plan become binding or something like that to make sure that we don't end up with an RS-25 development? Because I just think RS-25 Athens can't afford. We can't afford what we have now. Everybody else's property taxes pay to maintain infrastructure on our existing RS-25. And so I'm very skeptical of new RS-25 unless it's like this, where it's really RS-8.
I would tell you to be very, very careful, and I would strongly discourage that as a condition, primarily because it's not been reviewed as a binding site plan. I mean, we have generally reviewed it and we've taken a look at it, but you know, a binding site plan means that it comes out, it has to be built that way. And if we get into technical design review and something doesn't work, then they got to come back and go through the zoning process again. There's no administrative fix for that.
Okay. Is there another way to do it, like approve with the condition that the areas shown undeveloped on this site plan are to remain undeveloped but leave the flexibility to work it out administratively on?
You could add that as a condition. I think you could add a condition of a maximum lot size, but again, because it's contingent on a lift station that doesn't exist yet, I wouldn't advise it because you're kind of putting cart before the horse then. I mean, if you say your lots can't be any bigger than 10,000 square feet, and for whatever reason, the lift station doesn't get approved by the commission, they can't build anything on the property. They're stuck at that point without coming back through another zoning process. So you just got to be careful with those conditions. I understand where you're trying to go with it. It makes some sense. But yeah, I think if you were going to do that, and you've already tabled it once, it would almost be something they would need to bring back as a binding plan and go through that formal review process.
Okay. And would they be able to get their lift station approved prior to, so that they're not committed?
If they were to do that, yes. I mean, the lift station is scheduled right now on the agenda for a vote in next week. But during the agenda setting, it was discussed by the elected body to potentially hold it to the April meeting because the zoning would be coming through at the same time.
Okay.
So to ask them to return with a binding plan would put them probably at a minimum at your May meeting for a June vote of the commission.
Okay.
And that would be something they would have to really agree to. I mean, the only other option would be for you to recommend it to be denied, and then they withdraw and resubmit based on information they heard from you.
Okay. I'm sorry, just related to this, can I ask the applicant, would DR Horton have concerns about approval of a rezone with a condition that the area shown as undeveloped on the submitted site plan are to remain undeveloped?
I don't believe that we will have a issue with that, Commissioner Hall. The only thing that I would say is to leave the flexibility in case anything with engineering needs to be done to that area. It is not our intent to build houses in any of that area. But as Brad stated, we haven't gone through full engineering of the site yet. So if something were to come up during engineering that we just needed to shift something a little bit, I wouldn't want it to be an issue with a minor shift of something because of something that came out in the engineering reports. But it is not our intent to build in that space. So I think if you wanted to, Brett, can I ask, would maybe a maximum number of units satisfy that? Because I think that would still accomplish the
I'm
same
concerned
thing.
about large lot sizes
Yeah.
more than the number. of
Okay.
units.
I mean, because you're about at your max for the zone now, I think,
Mhm.
anyway. So to limit it to that's not going to do a whole lot. The biggest area of concern that I would have with limiting the areas currently shown as undeveloped would be, like Tiffany said, when they get into engineering, if that stormwater pond at the back end of this development doubles in size in order to accommodate their stormwater, and they can't get in there because we've conditioned that it wasn't shown as developed, and so they can't go there. You know, those types of engineering could create problems.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is why I think we much prefer to work with binding site plans, am I right? And just, have some of the stuff at least pre-engineered.
You just said, do you have a question for the applicant?
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay, you
Thank you, yeah. Even though we're making you get up and down like a yo-yo. Get your steps in today, right?
Right.
I did want to comment just briefly on cost of services. And as Lucy pointed out in an email earlier today, we had one of those done a couple decades ago. And it did kind of set a number, not only on the cost of the house, but also the density. But I do want to caution everyone that also, that kind of math also looks at the kind of sales tax revenue that the development like this would generate. So they're not just paying their property taxes, they're paying sales taxes as well. On the cost side, it also gets into school services. So a development this big is going to have a lot of kids. I mean, that'd be the goal, right? To have families move in who work in our hospitals and our schools and our industrial, whatever, all over the place. So to have simply the property tax pay for the infrastructure, it's not quite that simple. It needs to take into account also what kind of revenues this development would generate in terms of sales tax and how much pressure it puts on the school system as well, which of course is a separate elected body and that's not in our purview. But I'm feeling very Kristen-like right now, just like firmly on the fence. But I will say the thing that makes me lean on the negative side of the fence is the fact that it's not a binding site plan. And I appreciate Matt's creative ways of thinking about how we could get, basically what we want. I also appreciate the applicant, assuring us that they don't put the stuff on paper just for fun, that this is what they plan to do. But I feel like I'm working with so little detail about how this community would integrate in with the rest of the area, that I don't feel really comfortable with a straight rezone here. Despite the good work that this company's done to provide us with some pretty detailed conceptual plans. So that's kind of where I'm leaning right now.
I'm gonna add a couple comments. I think I'm kind of a broken record on this one, but I'm sort of back to this growth concept map update process can't happen fast enough, because to me, what's problematic about this isn't, I want housing there. I think housing there makes a lot of sense. It's surrounded by housing, there's park. I generally am in favor of that, but there's so little intentionality behind what's happening on Newton Bridge Road. So the fact that, I think the applicant made a really good point when she said that it's not really the responsibility or the fault of the most recent housing developer to somehow have to bear the brunt of the lack of infrastructure to serve the property. So I just, I guess I kind of wish this were coming a couple of years down the pike when there's a little bit more planning actually around what's gonna happen with this corridor and sort of Athens County knowing, okay, we're gonna be putting housing here, so we might as well get out ahead of this and incorporate that into our sewer planning, transportation planning, et cetera. Because, you know, I will never pass up an opportunity to talk about the intersection of Cathwood and Newton Bridge Road. It is one of my pet issues. Really bothers me. It is so unsafe. Wait till you have, some of you already have had teenage drivers learning to drive. And for years, trying to tell them what they should do, which I still don't know, is the right thing to do when you're driving north on Newton Bridge Road and you come up to Cathwood. It's not really clear what lane you really should be in. So I just tell them to drive slowly. So that's problematic. Again, it's not D.R. Horton's fault. That's a road that needs attention. So I don't know, I'm not really helping, but I guess I just would like some more intentional planning around the Newton Bridge Road corridor. And I think there's some groundwork that's being laid for that, but we're not there yet.
Two things. First, actually, I have a question for Mr. Jackson. Do you, in the legislative session of the state government, do you track any, do you keep track of bills coming up that may potentially impact our zoning or planning departments? Or do you bill watch in general, or is it wait until the vote comes in and then I can use my limited time on this?
So as a general thing, I don't track it per se, but we do kind of do like an annual update.
Okay, that makes sense.
Legislative updates to make sure that our current code is consistent.
Oh, of course, that totally makes sense. Okay, well then, mostly I didn't want to talk about this bill that I know is in the House. If you had a more prepared take on it, but right now there's House Bill 517. One of the things that it would do if passed the way that it is now, which who's to say if it will, is limit the ability of counties to have zoning codes that have RS-25s in them. Not by name, but by limiting maximum lot sizes of a half an acre or higher, I believe. Which in residential zones, which I think sounds fantastic. Because as Commissioner Hall was saying, having houses that spread out, especially the further out you get, the more of a fiscal nightmare it is. And that ties into this because, not because anyone necessarily thinks that D.R. Horton is going to switch up their plans, but you never know. A recession could hit next week, and then that land sits empty, and then D.R. Horton sells it, and then now someone can build by right under our RS-25 zone. So that's one reason that I'm in the no column on this vote. And the second reason has to do what our chair just said, and also what the applicant mentioned in her comment that I found really interesting was your conversation with Commissioner Fisher and discussions that y'all may have had about things happening on that corridor, which I have no idea what those things might be. Maybe that'll impact the Mayor and Commission's final vote in this. But as our chair was saying, that is sort of an ad hoc way of planning. A little bit less ad hoc than just going parcel by parcel. But still, we can't have this future land use fast enough so that we can actually sit and look and make legally binding distinctions so that if these ideas or plans that are being discussed outside of this realm don't pan out, we don't end up with subdivision after subdivision after subdivision with no thing for anyone there to go to. If this corridor is being developed with some other kinds of uses, that would be great, but we just can't have that done until we get our growth plan and our future land use update. So it's a timing issue for me as much as anything.
So, I think that there should be residential on this lot. I think, while it's not a binding plan and it would be nice to talk about it, if it were already zoned RS-25, we would not even have this discussion to begin with. And it just seems to me, and I'm kind of seeing it come up now a couple times, where we kind of want these developments to look a certain way, but we're also powerless to do anything about them to look a certain way. It's like beyond our purview. And in the end, is it worth stopping a development because we just don't like the aesthetic of like subdivisions? You know, I don't know. I mean, we do need housing. Do we need $350,000 houses? Probably not. But I also don't think you can make houses for much cheaper than that these days, unfortunately. It's just the nature of the construction business. But again, outside of our purview. So with that in mind, I am going to make a motion to approve a rezone for RS-25. Let's see where it goes.
Are you raising your hand a second?
Nope, that's what I
Okay,
said.
I have a motion on the table, would anyone like to follow that up? Okay, so I think that just dies on the.
Dies for lack of a second.
Okay, Matt?
Let me try a slightly modified version of that same motion. I would move to approve the rezone with the condition that no more than 5% of the area shown as undeveloped on the site plan shall be developed, which I think gives the applicant the stormwater flexibility and other stuff that Brad and the applicant talked about.
Can someone restate that motion? Or just will you restate it one more
I would
time?
be happy to. I move to approve the requested rezone with the condition that no more than 5% of the areas shown as undeveloped on the submitted site plan shall be developed.
Okay. Would anyone like to second that motion? All right,
I'll second that motion.
okay, there was a motion and a second. Any discussion? Sarah, I know you had your hand up. Did you want to?
Yeah, I just, I wanted to clarify for myself that I do not consider the subdivision to be an aesthetic concern. Like I don't love them personally. I wouldn't love to live in this subdivision. But that's not a controlling factor for me. And it's not, and as I said, not one subdivision, but lines of them, which is how it's how we get Tallahassee level traffic problems. It's how we build car dependency. And just from a planning perspective, from a use of the land in a way that is sustainable into the future, that is the issue I see with housing subdivisions laid out in that sort of ad hoc one by one way. Otherwise, I agree that getting hung up on aesthetics is not a good use of our time.
I want to piggyback on what Sarah just said, same. I wouldn't buy one of these houses, but I don't have to, you know. A second thing I wanted to say is I think we probably do need more $350,000 houses based on a study from a few years back that was really a workforce housing study. I can't remember the numbers, how much money you have to make to afford $350,000, but it is obviously not missing middle, but it's not, you know, it's not just for the landed wealthy kind of people. There's a high preference in Athens-Clarke County for more single family housing in Athens-Clarke County among people who work here. And if you look at the numbers of people who work here but live somewhere else, that's one of the driving factors. And I saw that number recently. I think maybe the ARPA presentation brought that to us. But I was surprised at the percent, like something like 70% of workers in Athens-Clarke County commute from surrounding counties. So I think, you know, I do think we need housing of all types, and this type of development is an improvement on the traditional cul-de-sac subdivision development. I mean, at least it does have, connectivity throughout it. One other thing I was gonna say though, boy, I should take notes when I'm thinking. Yes, that was, I guess, yeah, I guess those are the two main things. I think that, Matt's suggestion to limit the area shown on the concept plan, limiting it to 5% of that being developable, that assuages my most concerns about this development. Like everyone else, I think we have complete unanimity. We're unanimous around the table that, that housing is appropriate for this location. Sure, we'd like it to be some sort of maybe nodal village, but that's not, we don't have that kind of control. And I just remember the most important point I wanted to make. Should the motion include any mention of the roundabout? Is it Cathwood, right?
No, it's not included at this point.
Yeah, it is, I think, or maybe Vincent is closer to,
It's in the staff report, but now.
It was in the staff report as being a requirement, and then the traffic engineering department recanted based on distance from property and requirement to obtain private property. They just stated as a reason why they couldn't support it, but did not want that added as a condition any longer, that D.R. Horton be required to put it in at their own expense.
Okay, I see. So maybe we just need to, I mean, I know that intersection that you're talking about is like graduate school for learning drivers. My 16-year-old used to date someone who lived out there in that part of town and very shudder. But I think probably even without that, because that seems impractical, right?
Yes.
That I can probably slide over into the support column for this.
Could I ask for one point of clarification on Commissioner Hall's motion that may be helpful? Would you be willing to include that 5% shall not include any areas needed for pedestrian connections to the park or along Newbridge Road?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think, because, it probably won't touch the 5%, but I would hate for them to get into issues with, putting in that connection in an area that's shown currently as undeveloped, or, if sidewalk extensions on the north and south end of the property currently are shown as undeveloped, and they may need to get into that a little bit. I don't think that should count against their 5% wiggle room.
Right. So yeah, I'm happy to, if I can propose an amendment to my own motion to
yes, right?
include,
Just
that-
no more than 5% of the area currently showed as undeveloped area can be developed. This does not include areas needed for pedestrian connections to Holland Park or along Newbridge Road.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second the amended motion.
Okay, great. I also have a point of clarification. If the lift station is not approved, what happens to this?
If the lift station is not approved, then the density gets significantly less. It's the easiest way that I can put it,
Because they would be forced to do septic if they wanted.
and my assumption is that the lift station is part of their approach to this property. If the lift station is not a viable approval, then Horton's not going to build it.
Okay,
So, however, this motion, assuming it gets approved by the mayor and commission, would still travel with the property.
It would, whoever would be the next developer in would be limited to the areas shown on this plan as being developed unless they brought it back through and amended it.
or unless the mayor and commission, after denying the lift station, also denied the proposed rezone, which. I
Yes.
imagine they would.
Correct.
so with these conditions were just added, okay, the scenario where the rezone application is successful with the mayor and commission, and then something happens and D.R. Horton decides not to develop the property. It's rezoned RS-25, but with these conditions that are kind of based on the site plan. So then what?
It's just generally, it's based on, it establishes a developable area of the overall 137 acres that can be utilized for construction.
Okay,
regardless of who owns it.
okay, got it. Sir?
I guess two questions. Is it possible to add another condition that the approval of the rezone is contingent on the approval of the lift station? Is that possible? I mean, I'm sorry, I meant like procedurally.
Is it necessary?
It's not necessary.
Well, I mean, what I think is that if the lift station were not to be approved, that this would be a bad rezoning. If the lift zone were not to be approved, if our understanding is that D.R. Horton would then sell, we have a blank slate again. But then there's whoever has it next could not build even more density, could not add commercial elements. You know, it unnecessarily limits future owners who may have better ideas than this. So
You want, I don't know.
as a recommendation to the mayor and commission, I would say, like, so I guess that's the thing, is that it's not a condition of the mayor and commission's approval, but like, it would be a condition of approval as a body of this rezone. I'm sorry, I'm getting
I think what you're saying is you would want to I think you're trying to make a motion that you want to tack on an additional condition that makes this rezone application success contingent upon the success of the lift station.
I would change the wording to just, I mean, I think if there was a condition added and agreed upon by the current motioner to require that the property must also be served by Athens-Clarke County Sewer, I wouldn't go as far as specifying a lift station there
Right.
or anything else.
Looking different in the future. Oh, okay, so procedurally, how do we do that?
I mean, you would add, I mean, the other problem, okay, here's the flip side of that argument. If you do that, and it gets attached as a condition to this property, that it can't be developed without sewer, and the lift station doesn't get approved, you've just taken the use of this property from whoever owns it, because now you're saying they have no use of it until sewer gets there, and we can't do that.
It strikes me that if I can just comment on Sarah's proposal, if the mayor and commission decide not to approve the lift station, I would imagine that they will decide not to approve the rezone too, because it wouldn't make any sense. And so I think I'm comfortable relying on the elected officials to decide whether a rezone is conditioned on approval of the lift station. I think that
They'll vote on the lift station before they vote on the zoning.
Yeah.
And you just think your take on the situation is that the mayor and commission will not approve this rezone if they have already decided to, they're not going to get this, and they're be like, okay, I'm fine with that. I can drop it.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the table. 2 additions. Is there someone who could read where we're at with the motion right now? What's that?
One condition.
is modification.
Yes, one condition,
Yes.
one modification. Somebody could read it out so we make sure we're clear on it before we take a vote.
Got it in pieces, but it's approved with condition that the area identified on the attached site plan as undeveloped cannot be expanded by more than 5%. Not be reduced by more than 5% for development purposes, with the exception of areas needed for pedestrian connections along Newton Bridge Road or to Holland Park.
Any further discussion? Okay, do you want to do a roll call vote, Stephen? Go ahead.
Gary,
No.
Goodrum,
No.
All,
Yes.
Kinman,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Pass.
yes.
So motion passes 4-2.
Sorry, Commissioner, I just completely reworded your condition, but
Okay, the next item is one that I have an interest in due to my employment, so I'm going to recuse myself. And our vice chair will take over this.
That brings us to the next item under new business. Number 2023-01-0164, 195 Bray Street. Stop.
The applicant has requested to rezone the property from RS5, which is our smallest single-family zoning district, to RM2, which is a multifamily zoning district, for the purpose of building 46 multifamily units. They're constructed in 2 3-story buildings, 82 bedrooms total in 1, 2, and 3 bedroom configurations. It also includes amenity spaces such as a fitness center, business center, and community room. There's 82 parking spaces, a playground, and a stormwater pond. This is the site as it currently exists. You can see that we have the old Piggly Wiggly Shopping Center up here to the top. We have Stroud Elementary on the right. We have some residential properties on the south there, and then we have various government offices and service providers here. They're directly adjacent to the property. Property itself is completely wooded right now. And then we have some residential right here along just down Bray Street. Property is currently designated with the future land use of mixed density residential, so there's no need to change it. It is compatible with either RS5 or RM2 zoning. I also forgot to mention North Avenue. Snake is coming up here along on the left. As you can see, there's also some mixed density residential on other parcels nearby. The zoning, on the other hand, would change from RS5 to RM2. You can see that RM2 is not directly adjacent to this site, so it is somewhat isolated, but it is next to an RM1 parcel. There's some RM2 on adjacent streets, and then there's RS5. So in general, we're looking at general compatibility here with the zoning, even though there's not a district right next to it that is RM2, that carries the RM2 designation. This is the concept plan they've submitted. Again, this is non-binding, but this gives you an illustration of what they're looking at. You can see the school would be actually at the top up here. If you were just to keep going towards up your screen, you would get to the school. It's worth pointing out right now that this configuration, as shown, cannot be built for a variety of reasons. It does not comply with our zoning code for this area. The main issue is that their entrance right here crosses the property line. You can't do that without an agreement with the adjacent property owner. So this fundamentally doesn't work. That's how they're accessing Bray Street. Their property technically comes down to a point. So there's no access, even if they wanted it right now. They would have to negotiate an agreement with adjacent parcels. So that in and of itself stops right there, and you have to figure that out before you can proceed. Next slide. From a policy standpoint, we would say that the application is consistent with future land use map, with the zoning map. We don't have a problem with RM2 zoning being here. We think it's a fine idea. We would say that the application is partially consistent with our comprehensive plan. It does add to it increases the supply of housing. It's on an infill location. It's close to a lot of services. It's close to a school, close to North Avenue. On the other hand, there are a couple of ways that it could increase its alignment to become fully consistent. It lacks connectivity, not just with the main drive, but would be an ideal location to provide some bike and pedestrian, a stub connection to the school, that if the school desired, they could build a path to access this site, and that would help the kids in this neighborhood access the school in a safe and easily connected way. The design also doesn't really create a sense of place. It looks like your typical garden apartment complex, and those things have often struggled as they age. And so we think there's an opportunity here, particularly if you did multiple types of housing instead of just the 2 3-story apartment buildings, to really create a sense of place that creates social connections and attachment and develops a sense of care for the area and investment there. So we think there's a tremendous opportunity for a better design that would create a sense of place, and this one does not. It should be noted, those things are not reasons for denial. They're just points that we're making that would help it align more closely with the comprehensive plan. More importantly, it is non-compliant with our development and zoning codes as well. There's no access to the site. That has to be worked out prior to any proceedings here. The code compliance also requires a major overhaul of the site plan. It's not just some minor tweaks. There would be some significant overhaul. So while RM2 zoning could work here, it has not been our custom to recommend approval of a rezoning with a site plan that just fundamentally doesn't work according to our code. That's why we're recommending denial.
Can I ask a clarifying question before we turn it over to the applicant? Can we jump back to the slide with the site plan? There's a notch there at the point where it hits the road. There's a notch that.
Right there?
Yeah, on Q Public, it looks like it might be unopened right of way or something. What do we know about the status of that strip of land? The little rectangular cutout that is not on this property, but is also not apparently on the adjacent parcel.
And what we know at this point is we're making the assumption a lot of these little cutouts, we don't claim access or ownership to if they were unopened right of ways. We're operating under the assumption at this point that it's owned by Athens-Clarke County in conjunction with the property that goes with Department of that property where DFAX currently is, and it was just never shown as combined. But I've made a note of the same thing, that if in fact that is an unopened right of way that we claim no ownership to, it may be a much easier. Then the problem they get into is driveway separation. You end up, and there still may be a need to work with Athens-Clarke County, because then you have two driveways that come out on Bray Street that touch each other, or it ends up with being just big, may have just a few feet in between them. May need to be a design consideration there, but if in fact that's the case, that it's not technically owned by Athens-Clarke County, I think it's a much easier road to get to the end.
Okay, and how would what's your process? Like, do you have a process where you would be able to find that out by going back to the land records, or is that just the applicant would be expected to figure this out before?
We would certainly assist them to the level that we can, and that would be working through our Transportation and Public Works Department to see what kind of record they have, the assessor's office, those types of things. But Ms. Mathis is here on behalf of the Land Trust this evening, and I was sitting there making a note as I saw that pop up that I need to talk to her in the morning to see what they know too, because that may be our way out on this one.
Okay, thank you. On that. So now we will hear from the applicant.
Hi there, I'm Laura Mathis. I am here on behalf of the Athens Land Trust. I'm the president of the board. Our executive director, Heather Benham, couldn't be here tonight. She's the petitioner on your application form. So we are, I can address the specifics of the access issue, but in general, sort of the big picture here is we are entered into a partnership with Affordable Equity Partners, an organization. Jay Cox is here to represent them if we have any questions on their role. But to submit this through the Department of Community Affairs low income housing tax credit project. And so the first step in that project is to make sure, in that process, is to make sure that you have the appropriate zoning. The application will not be accepted if the zoning is not, doesn't allow the proposed use. And so admittedly, this site plan, we do expect to evolve substantially, but we're not at that stage yet. And so that is why it is submitted as a straight rezone to get our zoning in place. And then wouldn't actually anticipate submitting site permit plans until sometime after, late next year in the spring. And that is assuming that DCA awards the project, which we wouldn't find out until November. But their deadline for beginning the process is just these low-income housing tax projects are quite elongated. And so really, we're just driving towards that first goal and wanting to make sure that the proposed density, the proposed use is appropriate and that Athens-Clarke County agrees through this rezoning process. With respect to the access, that site plan actually references the tax map representation, which is not entirely accurate. We do have frontage. It's not a point. It's not adequate frontage. We need more. I suspect that little stub that looks like potential right-of-way, which was at some point in time, an alley was abandoned, and our survey reflects 15 plus feet of frontage there, which I suspect is a good portion of that, maybe half of that stub, and the other half reverted to the adjacent property owner, which is Athens-Clarke County. So to resolve the access issue, 15 feet is not enough to get the improvement in to a drive built to serve a multifamily development plus sidewalk, et cetera. So we would have to work with one of the adjacent property owners if we maintain access from this point on Bray Street. We also, are pursuing all options and talking to other adjacent property owners to see if we can secure an easement or access elsewhere. I will say that the property sort of page right is I think you have a letter of support from that group, and they've indicated that they would support a secondary access through their project to the site, which we would certainly explore. We would also explore, is there opportunities to acquire either through acquisition or easement a portion of that property to give us the additional width that we need, or also with the Athens-Clarke County parcel. I personally think the Athens-Clarke County parcel is ideal because we could resolve the issue that Brad referenced with regard to driveway separation by using a shared access off of Bray that then diverges. But all of those things are conversations that are ongoing and not resolved quite yet. Understanding it's always difficult to upzone a property where access is in question. If there are some conditions associated with the access that would sort of make it more palatable to recommend approval, we would certainly understand those. But we also want to be clear that we intend to address this access issue along with the evolution of the site design to conform to all of the standards over the span of the next year, should DCA award the property to move forward. And should we get the zoning approved, because it won't go anywhere if we can't submit in May if we don't get a zoning approval. So any questions about, I think that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the low-income housing tax credit program or where we are in the process.
We may bring you up.
Okay.
Ask you to come up again to
Sure.
answer questions. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who is here to speak in favor of this project?
I'll briefly speak in favor. Hello, my name is J. Paul Smith, and I'm an adjacent property owner with 243 Bray Street. And I believe that this project definitely fits the needs of the surrounding area, given the North Avenue redevelopment project coming in 2027 and the initiatives pressed by the community to fund tax allocation District 5, with which it resides. And there's also a local need for lower income housing, given the disproportionate unhoused population in the local area. And I overall think that it will be a beneficial project for the local area.
All right. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the project? Is there anyone here to speak against the project? Yes, there's no need. So we'll bring it behind the door. Kristen and then Sarah.
So I feel like since we have just a conceptual plan, we're just getting back to our roots of like, is this an acceptable land use to make it RM2? And I mean, I went by the property and it, to me, it seems like an appropriate use. And I also feel like you couldn't do anything with it unless you had access anyway. I mean, it might be early, but I'm just gonna like make a motion to approve. Would it make sense to say with the conditions that property could not be developed without access? But it also seems kind of redundant because you'd have to do that anyway, right?
I think you've got to be careful of the way you word that condition, because as we were dealing with on the last one, for the property to be developed for a single family house with a single family residential driveway, there's a different set of standards required. And a lot more flexibility in staff decisions and permits give access than there is to build multifamily. So I think if you're going to add the condition, you would need to word it in a way that just said appropriate vehicular access in accordance with ACC standards be approved. Because it's, depending on what they're building, it's different. Or
Okay.
you could just approve it and then they deal with it at time of permitting.
Yeah.
And would that put you in a jam, just to clarify what you said, Brad? If we
I-
approved it without a condition, is it accurate that they couldn't do multifamily there without having worked out an access with the?
That's accurate. They still could not do multifamily on this property without at least one point of ingress and egress. And depending on the density, if they get over 30 units, they may have to look for a second. And I see now where I think they're talking about is a secondary point of access to hit the parking lot behind the daycare center. Seems like it may really work. I don't know what I think we've got topo issues right there, but yeah, I think if you're so inclined, it would be appropriate for this group as the planning commission to recommend it with or without a condition.
I mean, I'm not prone to micromanage, so I'm just gonna put out there, make a motion to approve zoning change to RM2.
Second.
I forgot I was looking at you.
Did you have your hand up to make a similar motion? Because you were next in my queue.
Sorry, I said second.
I know, but earlier I called.
Oh, yes, no, I did not want to make a different motion. I just wanted to make a different comment.
Okay, well, it's your turn now.
Okay, so yes, having seconded that, yeah, seems like a no-brainer on this one. And just to draw attention to broader topics, from this, I think that this possibly illustrates a potential downside to this body's strong preference for binding site plans and plan developments. Not every person who wants to build something is going to be a nonprofit, but by strongly encouraging all of this legwork up front ahead of getting a recommendation on zoning, I worry that we perhaps cause ourselves to see a lot more D.R. Hortons and a lot less smaller organizations or groups. Yeah, they need the money. They can't get the money until there's a rezone. And if it's a rezone, then it's going to have to meet all the standards. So let's go for it.
Yeah, I just, I have more a question. If y'all don't get the tax credit, is it, and I'm not asking you to predict the future, but is it the board's intention to hang on to this property?
The board does not, Athens Land Trust is not the owner of the property.
Okay.
There is an agreement in place, contingent upon, zoning approval and, to finalize. And at that point in time, it would be a partnership entity that would own the parcel and take it forward. If the application is not supported, Jay might be able to better answer this question at that point with the, we have the option, to hold it and apply for the next year, but I'm not exactly sure what the terms of the options are on the property. So, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out and the zoning is in place, my perspective is someone has to figure out the access or they can't develop it. And they have to do it in a manner that meets Athens-Clarke County's ordinances, or they have to get, a variance approved by, the hearings. There's a whole slew of things that have to happen before someone else can do something with it.
So basically, that if we rezone an RM2 and somehow we don't get this that we want, we would still have RM2 where we're cool with it being, the developer would have to work out the same problems that y'all are dealing with here.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question for staff. Yeah, I'm totally in favor of the rezoning. I just wanted to ask staff if there's any concerns and conditions we should be thinking of to not burden staff with perhaps a new owner that feels entitled to the development and would lean heavily on staff to figure out the access issue.
I mean, the only condition that would potentially be in play on this one, they would come looking for would be, the access. And I mean, because that's not even a zoning issue as much as it's a transportation and public works issue under, driveway permit issuance and separations, things like that. I don't think so. I think you would just get in, if you added a condition like we talked about earlier. It would have to be worded in a way that would still allow for a single family house to be built on it, even if you rezoned it. And I think we're okay moving forward without a condition.
All right.
I appreciate that question though.
Okay, and can you comment on the public utilities wanting a water and sewer capacity evaluation?
That's a very standard comment in terms of, and it's one that's required whether it's going through zoning or not, based on their density. So when that comes in for, when it comes in for permitting, they will have to submit that based on the number of units, the number of bedrooms, those types of things for determination of approval. And then that's typically good for about a year. And then it expires anyway. That's a standard comment.
Thanks.
Any other? I guess I have one question for the applicant, just to clarify what was just
Sure.
discussed. Is it the case that the land trust has an option to buy the land from the current owner contingent on the rezone, or?
That is my understanding. Yeah, it is an agreement. We are not the current owner, but it is an option or some agreed upon contract on the property that is contingent upon all of this moving forward. I have not seen the contract, so I can't tell you, but that's my understanding.
I forget your name, sir.
Jay.
Jay?
Jay, yes.
Jay, can you enlighten us on that?
Yes, so there is an option to purchase a contract in place. It has not been yet, but essentially it'll be assigned to an entity that the land trust is a part of. And so to speak to the question of, what happens if it does not get credits and does not, I've worked with the landowner for a while and he's been very understanding and been working with us. I mean, there's the option to extend the contract to try again, or not. I mean, it just kind of depends on where we think it would be next year. And along with the land trust and other partners to see if it makes sense for us to move forward again next year. But so it's definitely there if for some reason we don't get funded this year, there's an option to try again next year and see if we can get it done.
Okay.
Then. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to reiterate Laura's points that we know there's an access issue we are currently working to figure that out, and obviously we can't move forward with anything until we get all the access issues out and meet all the development ordinances as far as our approvals go. So, you know, regardless of what it looks like now, we know it's going to change based on city and government requirements. So we're actively going to try to get that worked out on the front end so that we're not kind of scrambling if we got awarded. But I mean, we're looking at a pretty long timeline of us having the time to do that. I mean, we're looking at probably 12 months to try to get that issue figured out. But it is something we're actively working on right now.
Okay. Your last name again? I'm sorry.
Cox.
Cox. Okay, thanks, Chip.
Any other discussion?
Spend 10 seconds on my soapbox saying that I do not prefer planned developments, and just the ideal in the long term is for when we overhaul our zoning to have regulations that make it really easy for landowners to produce great designs that you won't even need to pick apart.
Those design standards.
Should we do a roll call vote?
Steve?
Mm-hmm. Gary,
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Hinman,
Yes.
Rouse,
Yes.
Pass.
Yeah.
Motion passes unanimously.
There's lag.
Okay,
So
so, report from you?
The only thing I've got, well, a couple things. I'm not sure if I ever gave you a formal update on the property on William Street, the old River Mill. That went forward to the commission. It ultimately was approved by the commission with a commission-defined option that removed a floor off of the front building that was of concern of staff because of height, and allowed them to add that floor to a building behind it that sits parallel to the river. Density stays the same, and it kept all the finished floors under 100 feet. So that was approved with a lot of work from everybody. So update there. Do not have a report yet for this month's cycle, as the commission will vote next month on that. I did want to just quickly, we talked about a little bit in agenda setting, but recognize Stephen for one of your reports looked very different than the other one. And that's kind of one of his initiatives that he took on coming in to try to clean things up and not be so redundant and cite this, sections that said the same thing. And so we hope you like it. We'd love your feedback on it. If it's positive, we're moving in that direction with all of our reports in the future. But that was Stephen's initiative. And that is all I have.
Great. And like I said before, I second that thank you, Stephen, for the new style. I think we generally like it.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't have anything further. So would anyone like to move to adjourn? Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We're done.
Thank you all.